Have you ever had the feeling that you're doing everything that you're supposed to do and it's still not working? That fine is as good as it gets and something in you knows that that's not enough?
Welcome to Thriving Humans. I'm Meredith, a healer who's spent over a decade helping people move through life's biggest transitions and find their way back to themselves.
And I'm Rebecca Thompson-Hitt, a holistic family therapist with over 30 years of experience. I don't do diagnoses. I look at the whole picture because you're not a set of symptoms. You're a complex human, and that's what matters here.
Every one of us came from a family. That history lives in us, whether we have children or not. On this podcast, we use relationships as a lens for understanding where we came from, what we're carrying, and how to do things differently.
We're not here to tell you what to do. We don't have your answers, but we believe that you do, and we're here to help you trust that.
This is Thriving Humans.
Let's get into it. 6, we're going to be talking about nurturing yourself so you can thrive. And Meredith, you and I were talking a little bit before about, what are we talking about? And we started talking about taking care of yourself. And then we went down this rabbit hole of self-care and what does that mean? And so can you start talking a little bit about that?
Yes, sure. So when we had this in mind, we were really thinking about how so often as caregivers, whether it's we're taking care of young people or older people or neighbors or friends, partners, you name it, oftentimes we're putting everybody else first, right? So super common, and it can be a hard habit to get out of. So when we talked about really thriving, so getting out of that, we're just managing, we're just surviving, we're making it through in our lives on a day-to-day basis. We want to get out of that mindset and really be in a space of thriving where we feel great and we're super excited about our lives, about our days, and what level of really getting in touch with ourselves and our own connection does that take? So when we started to talk about the language, what we noticed is we hear currently in our society a lot of talk about the term self-care. And while technically it maybe started out meaning simply taking care of yourself, which I'm going to talk about more in a second, what that means and how that might differ from nurturing yourself, the term self-care has sort of taken on a life of its own. And I'll just be bold and say, we don't like it. We don't like it at all.
No. No.
Not fans. Not fans. So what we've noticed is it's taken on this expectation of certain things to do to check that box, as in there are only some ways to actually effectively or accurately engage in self-care. And those ways typically cost a lot of money. They may use a lot of resources. You have to maybe carve out a huge amount of time because maybe it's a spa day or something else that involves like an aesthetic purpose, your nails, your hair. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Absolutely enjoy taking care of your appearance if that's something that works for you. However, that's not necessarily what we're going to be talking about when we talk about nurturing ourselves. So one thing we just wanted to point out is that we are not going to be utilizing that term or that meaning for this topic because what we're talking about doesn't have to involve a single dime whatsoever. No money has to be involved. You do not have to carve out large expanses of time as in a full day or hours on end. So we just wanted to clear that up right away. And that's one of the things we talked about. Something else we talked about was that concept of taking care of yourself, because sometimes people are thinking about, I just need to do the bare minimum to get through my day. Let me just brush my teeth and maybe wash my face and maybe shower, right? And this isn't to minimize those moments in life where sometimes you're dealing with things and it can be hard to attend to those because your mind is somewhere else. Of course, those times happen. There's no judgment about that. Sometimes you need to pick what you can get to, and it's more important for you to eat a meal in that moment than to have a shower, and you perhaps do not have the time carved out in that moment for both. That's completely valid. That definitely happens. What we're talking about is a different level and a different expectation for ourselves, which is really the nurturing piece. And when we talk about nurturing, a lot of times, again, we're thinking about how we nurture others. What do we do for other people? We do things like, their favorite meal. I'm going to go out of my way to do this special thing for them. Or, they're having an anniversary or a birthday. Let me do something special. What are the things that we do to nurture others? And how can we turn that around and really look into nurturing ourselves? So that's a little bit of some of the things we talk.
Oh, and I love that. I love that thought of, we're so good at other people. We're so good at that. So start there. What would you do for someone else? And is that something that actually would feel nurturing to you? If you carve out space to make someone else a meal, would you do that for yourself? If you carve out time to go on a bike ride with your child because that would feel nurturing for them, would you carve out time just to go on a bike ride for yourself because that would be nurturing for you? So this idea isn't about how much money can we spend, how much time is it going to take. It's not about checking boxes. And I also think that it brings us to this other point of societal expectations of what is a good use of time. Because I think that we were talking about this earlier. If you're going to the gym, that's a good use of time. If you're going on a run, good job, But if you're setting aside time to read a book because that would feel nurturing to you, not because you have to read a book for your job or something, but just something that would feel nurturing to you, that's kind of a waste of time in the eyes of greater society. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes, it's so interesting what people consider a good use of time, or my favorite, not actual favorite word, activity, right?
Yes.
I will have conversations with people and I'll talk about my day. And these are not people admittedly, that I hang out with a lot. However, I'll be having a conversation with someone and I'll have someone say, it sounds like you've been really productive today, right? And that's their assessment based on the things I happened to be talking about. And that drives me crazy because, first of all, rest is productive. That's a whole other topic, perhaps. Also, what the heck do we even mean? And we could go down a whole road about this. Essentially, this has roots in capitalism, right? Like, what do we mean when we mean productive? When we say productive, people are meaning something has to produce something, an outcome, a product, right? And so the fact that we actually need to step outside and, let's say, perhaps just sit and look at the sky, or look at some water, or listen to some sounds like birds. Most people would have a hard time saying, I spent 2 hours outside this morning. I was so productive, right?
Right.
I think most people in our society would struggle with that. Yet, there are all kinds of reasons why that is actually the case. Because if we step back and view our whole lives as the point, right? Just being is the point. There is no means to an end that's involved with our living our lives, particularly when we're talking about thriving and making the decisions that we want to make every day and asking ourselves, what would feel good right now? What do I need to do right now? Because we have to be able to be in a situation where we're thriving to even think about putting our light in the rest of the world, supporting other people with what they need. And all of that is connected overall. to everyone's purpose and meaning. So before I get any further out into that, I will turn it back to you for some thoughts.
I have so many thoughts right now. Yeah. Well, and I was really sitting with the word productive. I was really sitting with that. And this idea that we have to produce something, that there has to be an outcome. And I was still sitting with that idea of, okay, we don't have to produce anything. And for most people, that's a radical idea. We don't have to produce anything to be worthy of being on this planet, of existing. And that when we can nurture ourselves, then we actually have the time and the space to decide what is the next thing for us that is right for us in this life, in this experience we're having. And eventually there might be something productive that comes out of it, because something that we're excited about, something that but from the inside rather than from the outside, how is this going to look, or this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that thriving piece happens when you are sitting and looking at the sky, not when you are hustling, which is very different than the messages that most of us have gotten. Yeah, so it's like, I want to burn the word productivity too. We're going to have a long list of words that we're like, no, we're not using these words anymore because they have been co-opted and they no longer mean what they actually need to mean to support thriving. Because that's what we care about. That's what we care about. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I really appreciated when you were talking about that there are times when we are in those places where we need to just attend to the bare minimum. That happens, and that's not your fault. And many times it is a systemic. It is systemic. That, now we only have 30 minutes for our lunch and we had to pack it ahead of time, and we didn't have any time to do that because we were doing 16 other things that are layered on top. And so I was thinking about this, like recognizing the systemic cultural layering to this. And yes, sometimes we're going to be there. And if you're in that place, that's okay. There's not judgment around that. If you are getting your teeth brushed and that's a big deal right now, or maybe you've had a big loss, maybe there's something else going on, trust that unfolding of what you need right now rather than this external, this is what you should be doing. And when you get to that place where you have those basics down, then you can start looking at some of these other things. And there may also be, even when you're in that survival place, spaces to bring in some of these ideas in the way that works for you right now. That doesn't take a whole day, that doesn't take any extra money, that even if it's 5 minutes, if that's all you've got, that's how you start moving towards thriving. Yeah. So don't think, oh, well, I'll just have to wait until everything is great. But I just want to differentiate that basic level of I'm just barely getting by. And even then, what is it that you can do? And then as things get more stable, expand the time. But don't make this another thing on your checkbox. I really like that you said that word also, because we have this checkbox. We have this scoreboard in the sky of things that we're doing or not doing. And if we're not getting enough of it done, then we're not good enough. We're not worthy. We're not okay. And we do not want to add to that. And so that's why I wanted to come back and differentiate a little bit more. If that's where you are, be really gentle. If you've got a little bit more space and you recognize that you can shift a couple more things around, do it. Because you're going to see the benefits of making these changes. The more that you nurture yourself, the more that you are going to thrive. It's not the more that you do, the more productive that you are. It is the more that you nurture yourself, the more you're going to thrive.
Exactly. And I appreciate that you mentioned that gradual aspect because I think that also goes along with some of the other episodes that we've had. And we talk about you just start where you're able to.
Yes.
And the past does not matter in terms of how the future is going to unfold because you get to make different choices every day. And so you do what feels manageable for you and you can let it grow, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And let yourself grow and evolve. And I think it's a great reminder. Every day we get to choose, where are we? What is it that we're needing? And it can be very different than what it was yesterday or last week or last month or last year. You don't have to continue doing the same things if that's not working for you. We get to choose. Yeah. So, speaking of last year and decades ago, makes me think about our journey with this idea of nurturing yourself. And so I wanted to start and just ask you, before you had kids, were you taking time and nurturing yourself? What did that look like? If you did, what was that?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for asking. What a great question. So wow, my journey, I would say, in life was definitely informed by the cultural messages that I received growing up about how to spend time. I remember even getting the idea when I was a young person, maybe teenager, that it wasn't even okay to sleep late, right? Like you had to be awake and up by a certain time of day or else there was like something wrong with you or it just wasn't. So that whole like productivity business started early, right? Like, let's go, let's get up. If you weren't going to school, you better have chores or something. It's like, it was already a message that just being was not okay. That was not acceptable. Oh, you're just sitting there. You're doing nothing. What have you done? I had this long list of things for you to do around the house. Starts really early, right?
Hmm.
So I followed the messages that I was told by primarily my parents, although I did notice later that everyone around me was really saying and doing the same things as far as you go to compulsory school, you have to go to school, that's not an option. Then you graduate from school and then you immediately go to college. That was the message I received. And you have to pick something to study. It doesn't matter if you're 17 or 18 and you don't have any idea what you would actually like to spend time learning about. You pick
Right.
something to study. Then immediately after finishing your coursework, you go right into the workforce. You work for someone else so that you have a steady paycheck. You work 40 hours a week minimum, right? No other questions. And you better pick something that pays a lot of money. And so therefore you should be prepared to be miserable. That's why it's called work, right?
Right.
So that is your
Oh,
primary reason for being there. Everything else takes a back seat, whether it's fun or friendship or even family relationships. It all is secondary. By the way, you'll notice myself didn't come up on that list because that was never discussed or
no,
encouraged,
no, no, no,
right?
no, no.
So if there were extra time, you should be spending that doing something else for or with someone else. Never was it ever even suggested that you
Mm,
look into what might nourish yourself. So I followed that trajectory. I entered the corporate world in the United States. Yay, not. And I did, however, divert slightly in that I still had this calling towards things I enjoyed doing. So I also wanted to do those things. I wasn't willing to look at alternatives to doing the full-time work, and in the corporate world you were expected to do way more than 40 hours a week. So I was working all day and then I would pursue interests in the evening and on weekends. So my days were jam-packed. And during one period of time, well, for most of my life, I've been a performing artist, pretty much always. My level of interaction with it has gone up and down depending on what else is going on in my life, what else I allowed to take priority, whether I wanted that to happen or not. So there would be days that I would start work at 7 a.m., I would probably eat lunch at my desk and then work until 4 or 5 p.m. and then go straight to a rehearsal. Probably eating dinner on the way, maybe, or just skipping it and rehearsing until past the time I really wanted to be in bed because I'm also an early bird and early riser. And then I would go home and go to bed and start it all over again. And those were my days.
Oof.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we can all relate to that because it is what our culture teaches us. It is what we see all around us. Yeah. And that compression, that, it's a ticking time bomb. How long can we keep that up? Yeah. Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about when I was a teacher. So, okay, I guess even I'll back up a little bit more. In high school, I was in performing arts also. So, I would go to my full day of school. I started at 7 o'clock in the morning, full day of school, and then rehearsals after, and then home, and then homework, and then usually fall asleep reading some textbook that I didn't care about. Um, and then get up and do the whole thing over again the next day. And I just remember being exhausted and, not really having enough space for me. And then when I went to college, my first semester, I took 18 hours. So 15 hours at the time was a full load. And I took 18, being the overachiever that I was. And then I bumped it up to 21 hours because, hey, as long as I'm doing 18. Because that was what I knew. That was what was familiar to me. And so I kept going. And then when I was hired at an elementary school as a teacher. And all the questions were, basically they were looking for high achieving people who were going to pour everything into. And of course I I checked all their boxes. And so got hired. And I remember working the week, eating lunch at my desk, or maybe I would take my frozen French bread pizza and microwave it in the teacher's lounge if I wanted to have interactions with other people, which many times I did not. And grade papers during lunch and work on things until the evening. And I remember hitting Friday night at 7 o'clock and just being completely exhausted. I cannot keep doing this. I cannot go on. And I would go to bed usually at 7. And I am not an early bird. I'm the one who usually goes to bed at 10, 11, 12 and at the time, but I literally could not go on. And it wasn't until I had my son that I started, actually when I was pregnant with him, and I went into preterm labor because you can't actually sustain that kind of a life. So I went back to school where I took 15 grad hours at a time. So, so I was very much in that cycle. And then I ended up on bed rest. And I remember I went from 100 miles an hour to laying on my left side on the couch and staring at the wall and all of the things that I had neglected for all of that time that I was so busy, all the things that I couldn't even stand up to go take care of, and thinking, okay, this isn't really what I want for myself. What am I doing? What am I doing? So, yeah. So what about you? When you had your child, I just ran right into mine. So what happened for you?
Yes. So it's so interesting because I distinctly recall, mostly it was my coworkers at the time when I was working, who said, now remember, when the baby sleeps, you sleep. When the baby naps, you need to nap. Do not clean the house, make food, make phone calls. I had many, many people tell me this. So I am grateful for that messaging because I received it so much. And I thought, okay. However, when things, when it actually came down to it and the baby went down for a nap, it was very, very tempting to do a lot of other stuff because it was the only time I didn't have a baby on me, right? So I understood at that point why people told me that over and over again. And so that was the first time that I had an intentional practice of, okay, this is hard, except there's a reason people told me. So I'm going to try to take that advice. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to read a book. Actually, what ended up happening was I started to nap because I was so stinking tired, right? Like running around trying to do these things and also still trying to keep a house clean and keep people fed and yeah, all of that. So that was the first time. And as that continued on, I started to realize, oh, this is actually really nice. Sitting down, not moving, not having to do something constantly for a dedicated period of time. And it would be just depending on the age of my kiddo, at least an hour, maybe more. It just depended, right? Sometimes a couple of hours. So interestingly, that's probably what started me on the journey to realizing that nurturing myself was a very helpful thing. And it was a specific act. It wasn't just, let me try this here, then there, etc. I really could feel a difference when I was starting to pay attention to what I needed in that moment and actually following through on doing it.
Yeah, so that's a huge shift just in that the opening act of parenting, like in those early years of recognizing that it felt good when you slowed down. Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about when I had my son, when he was actually born, he was really colicky, really fussy. He was not the baby who, I heard that too, nap when the baby naps, but I could never lay him down. And so actually what ended up happening is that he literally napped on top of me. So we did contact napping so that I could keep him upright because that was how he was most comfortable. And so I had this kid who taught me so much about slowing down, and also he didn't sleep well. So basically anytime he was settled, I usually fell asleep too. So I would be holding him and falling asleep. So I did lots of things to safeguard, to make sure that we were safe, with this little one. But it was that slowing down and feeling like, oh, I should be doing something else, but also I really can't. It wasn't even really a choice at that point. And I remember my mother-in-law saying lots of things to me about, put the baby down, you should be doing things, and I just kept thinking, what else am I supposed to be doing right now? Because actually this is what I need and this is what he needs. This is what we both need. And it's actually that just settling and slowing down and resting together. And it became a little harder as he got older and he didn't need that as much anymore. But I'm sure that I went back to some of my older ways as things got better, now I'm no longer completely sleep deprived all of the time. But I never went back to that full level. I never went back to work full time after that either. And so that made a huge difference for me too, because I wasn't trying to negotiate all of those other things. And I had the privilege of being able to stay home. Now we were dirt poor. We had zero money for like anything extra. But that was a choice that we made. We really wanted to be home, be available, and raise our kids. And so we sacrificed a lot to be able to do that. But because I was in that place where I could stay home, I was able to rest a lot more. I think it was when my kids started homeschooling and I realized that I had this much bandwidth. I could not spend the entire day going from thing to thing to thing like I was seeing some of the other homeschooling families do. And so I started instituting 1 o'clock was rest time. So we would do our homeschooling in the morning and I would read to them and all of that. And then afternoon was rest. And that was the time that I would often go and sit on the back porch and stare at the trees. I think it was at this point that I heard about Pam Leo and her book Connection Parenting, and she was talking about the alpha brainwave state and the beta brainwave state. And so beta brainwave state is that go 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 do 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 kind of frantic that pace that most of us are seeing in culture around us, and then we slowed down. And alpha, so this is playing a musical instrument. This is looking at something in nature. This is just slowing the brain waves, literally slowing the brain waves down. And so I remember reading that book and saying, I want to experiment with this. What would happen if I just went and sat on the back porch and stared at the trees? And you know what happened was I fell asleep because I was exhausted. So a lesson will be repeated until learned. It's about that time my kids started going to Waldorf school and Pam Leo also talked about knitting. Sit and knit in the space and watch what happens with your kids. So that slowing down, even if we're not actively having a rest time, if the energy was too up, and I'm a terrible knitter. It's not about knitting something, like, oh, here's my sweater. No, I would like knit a Barbie scarf, or I would knit, and I don't even have Barbies, or I would knit a pot holder. Like you just knitting something just for that action and that repetitive movement. And that nurtured me in such a beautiful way. And I noticed that as I slowed down, my kids did too. Lessons will be repeated until learned.
That's so great. I'm so thankful that you shared that about the effect that your behavior had on the environment around you, because that's something else that we've talked about on occasion in some of our episodes. And so, what I want to say about that is just another reminder that what's good for us is always good for others. And when we are paying attention to what we need, not only are we affecting the environment around us, so when we are slowing down, when we are able to drop down into a place of comfort and security and safety, then others around us can feel that and also feel that way. Not only that, we also are modeling tools and ways of living for our young people, for our friends, for other family members who will undoubtedly be curious about what we're doing and may or may not receive our explanations with a positive response. However, we're still modeling. We're still showing people that there is this other way, and we never know who that might help. So,
right.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and we have so few examples of what it means to nurture ourselves and having that modeled for us, that the more that we can show up and do this, the more it will become commonplace, the more that it can become part of the new culture, the new way of being, which makes it that much easier to do. Yeah. And that changes the world. Again, imagine what would happen if all of us took a nap every day in the afternoon.
Yep.
In the whole world. What would happen? What would change? So, and I think that for me brings up another point, that it doesn't have to be a nap. I mean, there are several of my examples here where I have talked about, and you have also talked about, and then I fell asleep. And so nurturing yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you are resting, sitting still, We're giving lots of examples of that, but let's talk a little bit about what else nurturing ourselves can look like. What else has it looked like for you? What else does it look like for me?
Well, I love the example that you gave when you were talking about the alpha state, about the music, playing music, right? An instrument. And this is something I hear about from people who have really focused on other things in their life beyond what their close personal interests are. They lose touch with some of these things because they
Yeah.
don't really fall into a category for them, or they feel like they want uninterrupted time to do it. And so playing an instrument is huge. Lots of people have that interest. Either they already have it and they haven't done it for a while, or they like to learn something related to that. There are things like you mentioned also the knitting. A lot of people like fiber arts, creating things, and that's something that they just don't carve out the time for, and it feels really nurturing for them when they do. Things like creating a puzzle or reading we've mentioned, right? And a lot of times these things use different brain pieces, right, than what we're used to, and we can just forget about them, that they exist. So, I like to encourage people who are thinking about these, start a list because maybe they won't all come to you right away, and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know. What if I don't know? And I ask myself the question, what would feel good right now? And my mind is just so full of other things, or I haven't slowed down quite enough yet. So it feels stressful to try to think of these. Take all that out of it for sure, right? Because there are endless lists of things that are possible. So I guarantee you they're there. If you can't hear them, if they're just not accessible to you now, I would say starting a list can be helpful because you can come back to it. So maybe there are just one or two things that feel great to you right now that sound like a good idea. Go ahead and put those down. There will be more. And the other thing I want to say that you reminded me of is that in addition to knowing that we start where we are and we can build, some of these things really stick with us in a good way. So, for example, I may have had that experience with my young person. However, things ebbed and flowed and they didn't take naps forever. So things will change. And sometimes I would forget. And you also mentioned, sometimes life events happen and whoops, we totally forgot about some of the things that we liked. So the good news is when we get back to it, when we start doing these, that will actually make us think of additional activities that we really, really enjoy that are nurturing to ourselves. Some people really like to cook meals and they feel like in their day-to-day life, well, I just don't have the time for that. I need to just throw something together. However, maybe what you really want to do is bake something that has, a slower sort of time to take, and that feels good. So that could be something that you want to look into. So
Hmm.
apart from making these lists and allowing yourself to just think of things as they come to you, just know that even the smallest starts can really make you want to come back for more. And then
Hmm.
you want to do more, you have more ideas. It's a good thing. It's something that you really want to come back to once you have it. It's just a matter of getting that start.
As you were talking, I was just thinking about when I was a child, that one of the things that I loved to do was to look up at the sky and watch the clouds. And so it may be helpful to think about when you were a child, what did you do that maybe you've stopped doing? And maybe it wouldn't feel good to you right now, but maybe it would. And so, wow, okay, yeah, I used to love to do that. I used to love to sit in trees, which occasionally I still have done. I have found some really great trees at some of the parks near me, and I have more than one time climbed up into the tree and just to feel that, being held. And so there may be things that if you think about your younger self, there may be something to experiment with, to try, to begin with. If you're staring at a blank page and saying, "Oh no."
Yeah.
what does it look like for us? How do we nurture ourselves now? So we're in a different phase of life right now. Both of us have um, children who have launched into the world, and so we're no longer taking care of other people in that same way. And I was saying this to you earlier, that I realized that once my kids were no longer in the picture, I went back to my old ways and found myself overwhelmed. But I recognized it. I recognized that I was doing too much. I recognized that it wasn't working for me. And then I have actually, over the last couple of years, I have been making lots and lots of small changes, a little bit at a time, as I have the capacity, as I see an opportunity. But even from the point of taking my calendar and blocking lunch every single day as a recurring appointment for myself so that I don't schedule something through lunch, because that's easy for me to do. So just what are the small steps that were accessible for me, that felt doable, and I also started scheduling my clients so that I had at least a half an hour in between, so that if I needed to go lay down, I could. And there were many times that I did. And so that was just another small way that felt like I could nurture myself. It's not, well, I'm just going to stop working. That's not an option for me. So what can I do with what structure I already have in place? Or how can I change things so that it's going to feel better for my body, feel more nurturing for myself? So, yeah.
Yeah, those are such great examples, and I actually do something similar with my calendar. I will say that after that brief baby stage of napping when the baby naps, when that started to transition because my kiddo got older and they started having activities in the mornings or afternoons or things like that, I really got out of the habit. And it took me a number of years to get back into that. I specifically remember they were 9 when I finally realized that I really missed doing things that nourished me and that I loved doing, and that I really had not prioritized
Mm,
any of those things for a number of years. So I had the opportunity to have some time on my own, and I started dancing again, which I hadn't done for years. And carving that time out then built on itself because I realized how happy I was to just be able to walk to where I was going. And I also had a work exchange situation so that I could participate in different dance conferences and workshops and performances without having to pay for that because we were on a tight budget at the time. So even that felt really good, being able to do something outside of the house and on my own that I wasn't used to doing, and just learning new
mm.
skills, meeting new people, and that kind of thing. So from that point forward, I realized I actually can never go back. I can't I cannot backslide to where I was because it was just this whole open door that I walked through and realized I cannot turn around. So while, of course, what I did, how I did it, and when I did it maybe ebbed and flowed and looked different, I just knew from that point forward that I had to protect that piece of my life. So I actually began right around that time a regular rest practice, and like you, I put it into my calendar, and I still use a paper calendar because that's just me. So I would write physically, those spots of rest in the middle of the day. And then after that took hold, I started to evaluate how I was spending the rest of the day. And it became not enough to just have one rest period in the middle of the day. So I would identify things like, okay, I can do maybe one major morning commitment and one major evening commitment. And
Mm,
that has to be it. I can't continue to
mm.
stack these things up. Even with getting a rest in the middle of the day, it's still depleting. It's still
Right.
a lot. And also, it depends on your personality, right? I happen to be an introvert, so I definitely can't spend large chunks of hours in, let's say, groups or talking for 4 straight hours or something like that just doesn't
Mhm.
work for me. So
Mhm.
then I started to write in those spaces as well to remind myself, because like you, I would forget and I would schedule right over. Oh, look, there's a blank spot in my calendar. That must mean I'm available.
Right.
So
Right, right.
funny how that happens.
Funny how that
And then
happens.
taking into consideration things like travel. How long does it take me to get somewhere? Oops, I didn't leave enough time between those things. Now I'm rushed. Now I'm hurried. Oops, I forgot to pack food. Now I'm hungry. So, really just looking at how I can build in opportunities all day long and then allowing myself to be flexible so that if something comes up, I can release that people pleasing tendency that I used to have, which is, oh, well, I can't cancel this. I said I would be there. I said I would do this thing, and not allowing the flexibility to nourish myself in a moment that maybe was unexpected, that
Mm,
came up without warning, that I could still stop and say, wait, in this moment, what's actually going to be the most nourishing choice,
right.
not what is going to be the best for everybody else once again, right? So it is a constant process, and there's no like land of perfection, because even people who have it really dialed in to where they want it at that moment will still experience changes, and maybe changes in interests. Maybe what you decided is nourishing you at this point in time in your life
Mm.
isn't going to stay the same forever. And that's also okay. So that's just some of the learnings that have come out from my life.
Yeah. Yeah, hard learned lessons. But yeah, and I'm really also appreciating the flexibility and then the naming the people pleasing, and that, you know, if there's an empty spot in the calendar, that must mean that I'm available. And I think our culture teaches us that. Oh, there's still plenty of time. Oh, look at that. There's this hole right here. That's obviously meant for this person who's going to ask you to do something. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about last episode about boundaries and being recognizing what it is that you're needing and being able to say, no, that's not what I need right now. Because we do have to safeguard the time to nurture ourselves. Society is not going to set it up for us to do it easily. It's going to make it more challenging, but it's a requirement then to say, this is non-negotiable. Whatever that looks like for you right now. And it might be a baby step. I am taking 5 minutes before I go to sleep and I am doing something because that is the time I have right now. You know, that is the time my kids are asleep, and that is the time that I can take 5 minutes and do something for myself. But either put it on your calendar if you're using a digital calendar, if you're using a paper calendar, write it on there. Make yourself an appointment for yourself to nurture yourself. It's a date.
Yes.
Which reminds me of the artist date from The Artist's Way. And I was thinking about when my kids were little and I was reading The Artist's Way for the first time. And I got to that part where it was saying, take yourself on a date and go somewhere just for you. And I remember thinking, I don't understand. What do you mean? Like, you know, you go on a date with someone else, you decide together what you're going to do. And this idea of, wow, well, what do I want for me was just so even once I had the time blocked. So I blocked off the time. And then the next thing was, huh. And I remember I was in Florida at the time, and I went to downtown Tarpon Springs, and I literally didn't know what to do with myself. But I just walked around, and there's lots of water, and I just remember and thinking, I should be doing something else. I remember having that, but it felt so good. I had small children at the time, so it was this radical idea that I would, one, take time for myself away from my kids, two, that I would not have a plan. If I was going to yoga class, okay, great. That's a plan. That's productive. That's in that positive category of societal things. Go to yoga class. But this idea of I could just walk around and not have anywhere to go or be and have 2 hours or whatever it was at the time. So I think I just wanted to talk about that space where even if you have the time, you carve it out, you may have uncomfortableness. It's kind of like when kids are, the TV's off and they say, "Oh, I'm bored," and then we say, "Okay, well, it's okay to be bored. It's okay for you to sit with those uncomfortable feelings about not knowing what to do." And we may have those same kinds of feelings if this is new for us. This may be like me walking around Tarpon Springs saying, what do I do? What do I do with myself? And who am I if I'm not getting things done? I have so many things to do that I'm supposed to be doing. What happens if I'm just allowing myself to be?
Yeah. And I will say that I had the same exact experience when I read The Artist's Way and also tried to institute that. So I can completely relate to that. And in fact, the year I read it, I was so at a loss for what to do after maybe the first 2 times. I think I went to a movie, which I'd never done alone in my life, and maybe did one other thing, maybe went to a park, and then I was like, "Okay, now what? I don't understand. Do I keep doing these same things?" So I actually went to the library and got the companion book to that she wrote that has ideas. It has like 100 ideas for artist dates. And I'm like, shoo, okay, great. I just need someone else to tell me what to do right now. So I really did. I got that and I was like, and I think I like hand copied them down so that when I had to return the book to the library, I would still have that resource. So yeah, sometimes that's hard. And absolutely. It's a good growth experience for us, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and maybe we could offer some kind of starter list for those people in the show notes. Just, maybe not 100. Maybe we'll offer, 10 or 20 or something. But that might be helpful just to get people thinking about what might feel nurturing for them. Yeah. What would feel nurturing for you? Yeah. Well, are there any other things that we haven't talked about yet that feels important before we close this episode?
Think that feels pretty good. I'm glad that we actually mentioned the artist date because that's something I'd been thinking and then it escaped my brain. And so you brought it back. I love how we're always on the same wavelength with that. So I think that's a great way to wrap up, just to let people have the exciting task of thinking what's possible for them in this area of nurturing themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, we did not talk about the radical rest retreats.
Right.
So we just did one as a little test to see what would happen with a lovely group of people. And we're going to be doing more of these. So if you want the opportunity to be with other people, I found it so helpful to be in a group of people with a shared understanding. It's kind of like in our culture, we look around and nobody else is doing the kinds of things that we're doing. Or we're looking around and everybody is doing these other things that don't feel good to us. So having a space with other people who are doing those things that we're nurturing for them really, really felt good. And it made it easier for me to stick with it and listen to them talk about their experiences. And I felt like I wasn't alone in, navigating this. And it was a really beautiful experience. So we're going to be doing more of them. And so we wanted to just let you know if this idea piques your interest, that we're going to be offering some more resources as well to make that easier for you.
Yes, it's so exciting to be able to support people to do something in connection and in community. So while you all are out there doing your own thing individually in your lives to do what supports you, you can also come together with others who have that same idea. And it's really great, like you said, to just know that you're not alone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is the end of our first season. And we are going to have a surprise next season because we are still seeing what comes to us, what feels right. And we want your feedback. What are the things that are really resonating for you? What are the things that you would love to hear us talk more about? What piqued your interest? And we're going to be taking that in, and then we will record our next season. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with us on this journey as we navigate our first season. And Meredith, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to do this with you.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it. And so I'm excited to see what comes next.
Yes, it's a journey. Here we go. All right. See you next season.
Thank you so much for being here. These are the conversations we wish we'd had sooner, and we're so glad we get to have them with you now.
And if something landed for you, sit with it. That's your inner knowing talking, and it's worth listening to. Be sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.
And keep an eye out for our Radical Rest retreats. We'll have more details soon. Until then, keep thriving.
And take good care.